So Casper had a bad shed. So for those of you who don't know, Casper is my banana ball python. And as I said earlier, he had a bad shed. So first of all, let's just start out with what is a bad shed. So snakes shed their skin. Typically, it should shed all in one piece. However, sometimes snakes have bad shed. When they have a bad shed, usually that means the shed comes off in a bunch of tiny pieces or it gets stuck onto them, and that is what happened with Casper. He had a bad shed and he still has some pieces of shed stuck onto him. It came off in a bunch of tiny flakes. So let's talk about that. The reason I wanted to make this video is because I feel like it could help people. Stuck shed is a very common problem that a lot of snake owners deal with, especially beginners. So I do feel like this video could definitely help people. So I want to show you guys Casper's stuck shed and then how I'm going to be dealing with it and removing it, and hopefully this can give you some ideas for how you can deal with your own snake's stuck shed. First of all, I want to say that I am not perfect. I'm not a perfect pet owner. Stuck shed typically is a result of something being wrong with the animal's husbandry, and I acknowledge that. We're going to talk about that. I just wanted to point that out, that I'm not a perfect pet owner. I make mistakes too. I'm not going to pretend that I'm a perfect pet owner when I am not. Anyways, let's talk about snakes with stuck shed and what you should do about it. So here with me is Casper, and like I said, Casper has had a bad shed. So if we look at his skin here, you can see that there's still pieces of his shed stuck to it. There are some spots here where the shed has come completely off, but other parts, like right here, where the shed is still stuck on. You can see it's like peeling off right here a little bit, but we're gonna leave that for now. So now that we know what a bad shed is, and now that we've seen Casper, got an idea of what he looks like, let's start talking about bad sheds and what you can do to prevent and to help them. So you've just discovered that your snake has had a bad shed. The first thing you want to do, ideally, is remove the shed. However, we're going to skip over that for now because I'm going to show you that soon, but we're gonna talk a little bit first, okay? All right, so you just discovered your snake has had a bad shed. The first thing you do is remove the shed, but what do you do after that? As I mentioned earlier, stuck shed is usually a result of something with the animal's husbandry being off. So what you wanna do now is identify the problem. What caused the stuck shed in the first place? One of the most common reasons for stuck shed would be incorrect humidity. If the humidity is not correct for that specific species, that animal is going to have a hard time getting the shed off of their skin. This was the issue for me. So let's talk about my specific example. So I noticed that Casper has stuck shed. I want to know why. So I sit and I think about it, and then I realize it. I believe the reason why Casper has stuck shed is because my air conditioning went on this month. So I'm trying to figure out the cause of Casper's stuck shed, and then I realized that in this past month I had to switch my house from heating to air conditioning. And when you switch to air conditioning, typically it dries out the air, because air conditioning doesn't just cool your air, but it usually also dehumidifies it a bit. So since the air conditioning came on in the past month, that could definitely be the cause of Casper's stuck shed. I have never lived in a house with air conditioning before I moved here. I've only lived here for like 7 months now, so air conditioning is kind of new to me. So when I turned on the air conditioning this year, I didn't even really think about it affecting the humidity for my animals, because like I said, this was totally new to me. So now that I know what the issue was, now that I know that it's because the air conditioning came on, I know how to prevent that moving forward, right? We learn from our mistakes. Woo. So now I know that when the air conditioning is on, I'm just going to have to work a little bit harder to keep the humidity correct in his enclosure. So now that I know how to prevent the stuck shed, it hopefully won't happen again. So for all of you guys out there watching, if you have a snake with stuck shed, please don't just bathe the snake, get rid of the shed, and then not change anything, because the snake will likely just have a bad shed again if so. It is super important that you figure out the root of the issue. Without knowing what caused the bad shed, you're not gonna know how to prevent it again in the future. So just keep that in mind. If your animal has a bad shed, don't forget to figure out the cause of the problem and fix it. Now that that is all said and done, I'm gonna go ahead and start taking care of Casper's stuck shed. So the first thing that I'm going to do when it comes to taking care of Casper's stuck shed is to grab a container that he comfortably fits in. So you can see that Casper here comfortably fits inside of this storage tub. I would also recommend having one that has lids on it. So this one does have a lid that can go on it. And you're also going to want to make sure that your animal can still breathe. So this container here, you can see, does have some holes on the side melted into it. This is one of the containers that I used to transport my animals when I moved. So these are really helpful to have around. But anyways, yes, you're going to want to take some sort of waterproof container that your animal can comfortably fit in, that can latch shut, that has air holes. And now what we're going to do with this tub is we're going to put some water in it. If you look at this stuck shed here, like you can see, there are quite a few spots where the shed is lifting up on its own. Now, as tempting as it might be to just go ahead and peel it off, I wouldn't recommend doing that, especially if you're someone who has never dealt with stuck shed before. If you go and try to peel things off, you may end up damaging their scales or hurting your animal, or just things could go wrong, and ideally we don't want things to go wrong. So I would recommend avoiding picking at the stuck shed. So instead what we're going to do is go and put some water in this tub. So I wasn't able to film this just because I needed to use my hands, but I just went ahead and I put some water in the tub like I said I was going to. So the purpose of this is to let your snakes soak in, to help them loosen the stuck shed. So when you're putting the water in your tub, you don't want to make it very deep. Obviously you don't want your animal to drown or anything, so they should be easily able to hold their head above water. And if you're using tap water, you also want to make sure you dechlorinated it. I personally use tap water, so I dechlorinated it. And lastly, you want to make sure that your water is a safe temperature. Obviously you don't want your animal to be cold or to get burnt, so it's really important to make sure that the water is a good temperature. You can use a thermometer to check this. My water is right around 80 degrees. Make sure that it is comfortable for you to touch. You don't want it to be super hot, it shouldn't be cold or anything like that. But personally, I would recommend probably keeping it somewhere between 75 and 85 degrees. Now it's time to go ahead and add Casper in. He's probably not going to like it a ton, but it is important for him to get this shed off. So I'm just going to gently take Casper here and very, very gently put him in the water. Let him kind of go in at his own pace. He probably won't fully go in on his own. I might have to put the camera down to get him off of me. Yeah, I do. I'll be back in a second. So unfortunately, I needed both hands, so I had to put the camera down for a minute. But as I was saying, we're gonna go ahead and put Casper in the tub and just let him soak for a little bit. So once your snake is in the tub, you want to leave them there for a little bit in order to let them, so once your snake is in the tub, you do ideally want to leave them there for a little bit to let them really loosen up the stuck shed. I personally will probably leave Casper in here for about 20 minutes. However, it is super important that when your snake is in the tub, you're supervising them. You don't want to leave or anything, because you want to make sure they're not getting panicked being in the water. You want to make sure that they're not panicking in a confined space. You want to make sure they're not trying to escape or anything like that. So please make sure that you are supervising your animal while they are soaking. Soaking snakes is my personal favorite method for removing stuck shed. I know other people do have other methods, and if you prefer other methods, that's fine. This is personally just how I do it and how I wanted to share it. However, I've always found that this has worked well for me in the past when I've had to soak snakes. Basically, all I like to do is just let them soak themselves for 20 minutes. A lot of the times during that soak, they get a lot of the shed off on their own, but what they don't get off has usually loosened up quite a bit just from them being in the water and in a very humid tub, that once it's off, it's usually very easy to gently get the rest off, which I will show you when we do that. Also, make sure while your snake is soaking that you're still checking the temperature on the water. You can either just leave a thermometer right in there, I would if I had an extra one, so then you can always see what the temperature is, or you can go back and check it. So while your snake is soaking in the tub, it's also super important to make sure that you're continually checking the temperature of the water. You can either just leave a thermometer in the water, or you can just keep checking it every couple minutes and make sure it's still a comfortable temperature. And if you need to add in some more warm water, then make sure you do that and dechlorinate it and all that fun stuff, you know. So it's been about 10 minutes since Casper was first put in the soak, and as you can see, a lot of the shed has started to come off on his own. I've noticed while he's been in here, he's been rubbing his side up, like he's been rubbing his body up against the sides, and it's been pulling quite a lot of the shed off. So I'm gonna leave him in here for another while longer, even though he just wants to get out, but hopefully with this soak we can get a lot of the shed off of him. Okay, so I'm checking on Toby again, and once again you can see a lot of the shed has come off. There is still some on him though, but I bet you if I were to just rub my fingers on this, it's gonna start peeling off now. So very, very gentle rubbing, just like this, super, super gentle, is enough to start peeling the shed off now that it's been soaking. So helping the shed off like this once it's wet by just kind of gently peeling it off and not letting your snake escape is a lot different than peeling it when it's dry, and it's a lot less likely to cause any sort of harm to your snake. So just recently I went ahead and I switched the water out on the tub here because it was getting a little bit cold, and there was also just a ton of shed in it. So this is all new water, so you can see these are also just more pieces of shed that have come off since I switched it. My fingers gently on his skin, the shed starts coming off super easily. And so I just keep doing this every few minutes, and eventually once all the shed is gone, Casper can go back in his enclosure. Isn't that right, Casper? Are you out exploring? Alright, so it's been about 20 minutes now, so I'm going to open up the tub and see how Casper's looking. Depending on how he's looking, I may end up soaking him a little longer, or possibly coming back to this tomorrow. Let's see. Alright, so if we look at Casper's body here, it looks like most of the shed has come off. But yeah, if we're taking a close look at him, he looks pretty good. I'm obviously going to take him out and take a closer look at him, but if we're looking at him just like this, it looks pretty good. So like I said, I'm gonna take him out and look at him off camera and confirm that everything is looking good. You can see all the shed in the water here, but as long as everything continues to look good with him, I will just be putting him back into his enclosure. And there he goes. I was able to confirm that all of the shed is off of him. He's looking nice and good. So now he's just slithering back away in his enclosure. Alright, so now that Casper is taken care of, I am going to end this video soon, but quickly, I do just want to talk about preventing stuck shed before I do that. So obviously, stuck shed is no good, and obviously we do want to prevent it as much as we possibly can. With that said, I do want to say it does happen. Mistakes happen sometimes. People make mistakes. Stuck shed can still happen even if you are a great owner. So if it happens to you sometimes, please don't beat yourself up over it. You're not a terrible person because your snake got stuck shed once. However, we should still try to prevent it as much as we possibly can. The best way to prevent stuck shed is basically just by having proper husbandry for your animal. And I know that is such a basic thing for me to say, but it is the truth. Animals need proper husbandry to shed, and this includes humidity, temperature, enrichment items in the enclosures, all sorts of things play a role in your animal's ability to shed. I would say to start with humidity. That is usually the first culprit of bad sheds, is incorrect humidity. So double check your humidity, make sure that is correct. Also check your temperatures because temperatures can affect it as well. Also make sure you have items in your enclosure that your animal can rub on to get their shed off. For example, cork bark is great for this because it has a really rough texture, so if an animal is rubbing their body on it, it's going to be really helpful for them to get their shed off. Also take a look at your pet's weight. Sometimes animals who are overweight have a harder time shedding than those who are a healthy weight. So if your animal is frequently having bad sheds, even if their husbandry is correct, it could be a weight issue. And lastly, I do want to say that if it is an issue that keeps reoccurring, a vet visit is never a bad idea. And if that includes needing to see a vet, then sometimes that's just what you gotta do. But yeah, best way to prevent it is by having proper husbandry and just keeping on top of that. All of that said, I'm gonna go ahead and end the video here. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you did enjoy this video, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Also be sure to check out all of my social media. It will all be in the description down below, and I would love it if you check that out. It would mean a ton to me. All of that said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next video.